بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. قال الله عز وجل في كتابه العزيز وفرقانه الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم آية المنافق ثلاث: إذا حدث كذب وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا اؤتمن خان أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Honorable brother and respected sister, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To be completely honest, the topic we have to discuss today is not necessarily one which is going to be very melodious to our ears. Right? It's not something that's going to really make us happy, because it's a bitter reality which we all face, that we all have to deal with. And the dilemma and the tragedy that I'd like to speak about, as alluded towards with the title was From the Gloom of Hypocrisy into the Radiance of Transparency. Unfortunately, the times in which we live today, when we meet people for the first time, or when we meet people for a short amount of time, or when we just meet people in general, we're not meeting them. We're not meeting them, we're meeting their representative. We're meeting their representative. Meaning, they are putting on a mask, they're putting on a different personality in order to make an impression for the first time. Unfortunately, that as bitter and as harsh as that sounds, it's very real. It's very, very real, and it's very true. And eradicating a particular ailment, removing and completely obliterating something which is wrong, something which happens to be a quandary, something which happens to be a spiritual sickness. In order to do that, in order to get that done, we have to first and foremost realize that it's there. You can't remove something, you can't obliterate something that you don't agree exists. So first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the fact that that's another problem that we have, that's coupled with this problem of hypocrisy, this problem of having a representative meet people on our behalf when we meet people. Coupled with this problem is the problem of us not recognizing it, not acknowledging it, not understanding that it exists. Right? And although it exists more in our times, because we have become, a nation of just expressing ourselves, right? And when you express yourselves all the time, right? To give you an example, we all, our lives are social media. They revolve around social media, posting pictures and sharing pictures and letting people know that we're happy while we're actually not really happy. A lot of times when you see, that's one of the dilemmas of social media, is that when you actually see the picture, that's not necessarily how the people are. That's not necessarily what their life looks like in general. Right? That's just a moment, that's just a glimpse, which makes you then see those pictures and then get depressed and become sad, like, why is my life not going like this, etc. Right? That's another topic on its own. But when we express ourselves so much, this quality of hypocrisy kind of creeps in. It makes its way into our hearts, and it settles in, and it just gets embedded in our hearts. And one really great dilemma that we face is that we don't acknowledge that it's there, right? Because we all want to be under the very not true but very sunshine and rainbows vibed perception that there's nothing wrong with us, that we're not hypocrites, because it sounds harsh, because it sounds unreal, because it sounds like we're bad people. We have to realize that it exists. To give you an example, the Sahaba before we even get to the Sahaba, that the Tabi'een, one of the greatest Tabi'ees of the past, his name was Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, a great scholar, an illustrious luminary of the past. Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah was an individual who was known as the second Umar. Right, Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, we know him for his piety. His piety includes anecdotes wherein the Prophet ﷺ would say that if there were any prophets after me, لو كان بعدي نبي لكان عمر, right? أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, if there were any prophets after me, it would be Umar radiallahu anhu. And this man was known as the second Umar. This man was really, really pious. When he was addressing a crowd in his farewell sermon, in his last sermon ever, which would be his final message that he would leave with the people, he was addressing a crowd of 50,000 individuals, right, in Sham. And when he got to the pulpit, before he addressed the crowd, he made a disclaimer, he made a statement. He said that I'm addressing y'all, but I'm telling you, مَا أَعْلَمُ, I don't know one individual, أَحَدًا أَذْنَبُ مِنِّي, I don't know one individual who is more sinful, who is more sinful than I am, because I have the most sins in comparison to all of you. And then he starts addressing the crowd. Very transparent people. Very, very transparent people. People who are really afraid of their sins. Today we commit the sins, but we're not afraid of it. We're brazen. We're very, very brazen. We become very bold and very shameless when it comes to offending Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Back then, even though they sinned less, but they feared those sins more. They feared the ailments. They feared those sicknesses more. To a point where it would haunt them, and they would have to make disclaimers like that in front of an audience of 50,000 individuals. Right? And to give you more examples from the lives of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu themselves, you know, there's a scholar by the name of Ibn Abi Mulaykha rahimahullah. He's a tabi'i, meaning a person who comes right after the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He encountered a lot of Sahaba. He describes his meeting with the Sahaba as saying that he met 120 Sahaba. 120 Sahaba. And he said, كُلُّهُمْ يَتَّهِمُ نَفْسَهُ بِالنِّفَاقِ. Every single one of those 120 companions of the Prophet ﷺ would accuse themselves of being a hypocrite. Sahaba, companions of the Prophet ﷺ. You know what Allah says about them? Allah already puts a stamp and a seal on their forgiveness. Allah says, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى. Every single one of them, Allah has guaranteed them paradise. The Prophet ﷺ guarantees a cluster of them, a few of them in certain statements of his, but as far as their general body of all of them is concerned, Allah guarantees them paradise. Allah says about them, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Allah is happy with them and they are happy with Allah. Despite that, these people would be so paranoid. These people would be so scared. Am I a hypocrite? You know, every single one of them, which is why we have a very emotional incident of Hamdallah radiallahu anhu. Hamdallah radiallahu anhu was such a special companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Hamdallah radiallahu anhu was allotted the boon of being one of the secretaries of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Secretary of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the most sensitive matter. You know what that sensitive matter was? He had the names of all real hypocrites. Right? Those who actually kept clandestine disbelief and portrayed and displayed belief. These type of people who would come and pray, but they were disbelievers at heart. So he had the names of all these real hypocrites and these bamboozlers and these grifters, these con artists. He had the names of all of them, right? The Prophet ﷺ, it would take a really heftily spiritually equipped individual for the Prophet ﷺ to trust him with this type of sensitive information. Hamdallah radiallahu anhu used to roam the streets of Medina, and when he would roam them, he would just go around just yelling out like a madman, Nafaqa Hamdallah, Nafaqa Hamdallah. Hamdallah has become a hypocrite. Hamdallah has become a hypocrite himself. The Sahaba would notice, and they're like, man, if this guy's a hypocrite, then what about me? What about me? So then they actually approach Handala radiallahu anhu, and they told him, Handala, why don't you ask the Prophet ﷺ regarding, or why don't you address this predicament with him, because he's here with us, right? Why don't you go and tell him about your agony that you're feeling regarding yourself being a hypocrite, so he can clarify as to whether or not what you think of yourself is hypocrisy or not. Handala radiallahu anhu took this opportunity to clarify with the Prophet ﷺ as to, what exactly is the case in reality. He approached the Prophet ﷺ and he said the same exact thing. He said, Nafaqa Handala. Handala has become a hypocrite. Prophet ﷺ asked him, Handala, what makes you say that? What makes you say that? What makes you feel that way? Handala radiallahu anhu, you know what he said? He said, O Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when I'm in your discourse, when I'm sitting in your gathering, like a spiritual gathering like this today, I feel very spiritually uplifted. I feel really good. I feel like, there's Jannah and Jahannam right there. It feels like, as far as the matters of the hereafter are concerned, I'm set. But when I leave your gathering and go back to the wife and the kids, families, and that feeling sort of diminishes, and I engage in materialistic endeavors, that's why I feel like I'm a hypocrite. Their materialistic endeavors probably contained more rewarding actions than our rewarding actions that we carry out ourselves. Right? Their daily activities, which they considered materialistic, was probably more spiritual than our spirituality in and of itself. And he's saying that. He's saying that when I'm with my families, I feel like, I don't have that feeling, so I need to come back. I need to rush back to you and feel that way yet again. The Prophet ﷺ reassured him and told him that, don't worry, Handala, you are not a hypocrite. You're not what you say you are. You're not what you claim to be. Why? Because it's normal. Because it's normal to go back to your families and not feel that way. To not feel completely spiritually uplifted all the time, which is why spiritual doses actually help. What would they be there for if you didn't feel a negative way when you go back? Right? What would compel you to come back here in that case, right? And he gave the reasoning. The actual reasoning the Prophet ﷺ gave was, he said that if you stayed in that condition, لَصَافَحَتْكُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, right? If y'all stayed in this condition, then angels would just come and start shaking your hands, because now you're not in the realm, or you're not in the fraternity of human beings anymore. You're an angel now. Right? Angels only live a life completely free of sin, or completely bereft of lack of spirituality. That's only angels. That's not human beings. That's not how we're designed. That's not how we're programmed to live. But putting that comment to the Prophet ﷺ aside, that was to make us, not completely lose hope and not completely give up, because that's what Shaitan wants us to do. So although the topic for today is not necessarily to make us despair or to lose hope or to live in complete paranoia where we're not able to do anything spiritual after that anymore because we think there's no point. That's not what the lecture is for. It's just to make us aware. It's just to make us vigilant. It's just to make us be afraid of ourselves. Right? That if we don't tame ourselves, if we don't always be on the watch, be on the lookout, be on our toes after ourselves, then we will eat ourselves up through lack of spirituality, through complacency, through self-conceit. These qualities, these traits, these attributes, which are just attributes, will become propensities. They will become inherent. And we will think there's nothing wrong with it anymore. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a beloved mother, she used to conduct lessons for the tabi'een. One of her students came to her and asked her, "O Aisha, O my mother, O my teacher, radiallahu anha, man ittaqi, who is a pious individual? Who is an individual who fears Allah?" When she responded, she said, that individual who thinks that he or she is a hypocrite, that is the greatest worshipper of Allah. That is the greatest servant in terms of being conscious and fearful of Allah. They asked her, like, on the flip side of the coin, then who's a hypocrite? She said that individual who thinks that there's nothing wrong with him or her. That's a hypocrite. So if we came here today and we looked at the title and even the thought slightly grazed our minds that this person or that person needs to listen to this lecture, and that's the greatest sign of hypocrisy. Greatest sign of hypocrisy. I'm not up here lecturing because I'm free of it. I make the same exact statement as Umar bin Abdul Aziz. ما أعلم أحدا أذنب مني. I don't know anybody with more sins than me. Right? But I'm just here to relate the message, to vent what I truly feel bugs me in my heart of a dual personality that people develop nowadays. You see, hypocrisy is of many, many types. Right? There's many aspects, there's many perspectives to view this dilemma. Right? What I'm not talking about, the best way to clarify what I am talking about is to tell you what I'm not talking about. What I'm not talking about today is the hypocrisy of belief and disbelief. Because that is just, that's hypocrisy to a point where you're not even, there's no fix for it. You're not a believer at that point, right? This is within the fraternity of believers, the hypocrisy that we have. This is the hypocrisy of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he states, شَرُّ النَّاسِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ ذَا الْوَجْهَيْنِ أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, that the worst people on the day of judgment in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that individual with two faces. That type of hypocrisy. Where we put on a personality for view, for display, and we conceal, we keep clandestine, a complete different personality inside. The more you learn about your life behind closed doors, the more skeletons you see coming out the closet. The more evil is hidden inside. You know what's the difference between greats and elites that history records and the greatest of all greats, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You know what's the difference? The historically acknowledged individuals, the more you read about their lives behind closed doors, the more you figure out, you know what? That person wasn't all that. You just know about their anecdotes. You just know about the good things that they've accomplished. You don't know the skeletons they've kept in their closet. Which is why, like, for instance, if you ever see like Academy Awards or something like that, and you see the smiles on the family members of the individual going up there to collect his or her reward, the smiles, you can sense, you can see that they're fake, because those individuals, that fake smile, what are they saying through that? They're saying that we know this person, he is not or she's not like that. And the difference now is that when you learn about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what you see from his outer life, what you see for what he put out for display is a mere glimpse. Is a mere glimpse of what goodness and what compassion and what beautiful and sublime character he had hidden in his inner life, in his personal life. The more you learn about him, like behind closed doors, the more you learn to love him. The more you learn to appreciate him. The more you learn that he was more wonderful than what he put out for display. That's the difference. Which is why he's our role model. We need to also, in terms of role models, we need to really, we need to really pick the right ones. It's another really, this leads to dilemma after dilemma, right? One of the greatest dilemmas is that as human beings, in order to follow something, some type of doctrine, we need role models, right? We look for somebody who's accomplished it so that we can relate to him or her, thereafter follow them, right? But when it comes to role models, a lot of times we make materialistic accomplishments the standard for what a successful personality looks like. Which is why when we look into the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions, it seems kind of outdated for us. Because what they did for materialistic success would probably not be applicable for today, and that's 100% true. Which is why we discard them as role models in reality. We hear about their stories, we come to lectures, seminars, and programs like this. We're very fascinated by it. Sometimes we may even shed a tear. But when it comes back to going to our regular lives, what we implement on a daily basis, who are our role models? Ask yourself. Ask yourself. You know, the Prophet ﷺ was asked in a gathering of people that actually one individual came to him while he was in a gathering of people, and he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he asked him, "O Prophet of Allah, I'm really sad." And he started crying. The Prophet ﷺ said, "What makes you sad, man?" He said, "Because you know, if I ever miss you while I'm at home, all I got to do is come to the masjid and you're here. All I got to do is show up and you're here, and I get to see you. But I realize that one day I want to come to this masjid and you're not going to be here, or I'm going to pass away and I'm not going to get to see you again. That's what makes me sad. That's what makes me cry." And the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, "Anta ma'a man ahbabt." You will be with who you love. You will be raised, resurrected on the day of judgment with who you truly love, attesting or vouching for his love being true love for the Prophet ﷺ. Let's ask ourselves a question right now. Let's put, all of us individually, put a picture in your head. The picture is you being raised on the day of judgment, being resurrected on the day of judgment. If Allah were to take your life today, if Allah were to seize your soul today, and He was going to raise you with who your role model is, not who you say you love. All of us are going to say we love Allah and His Messenger. Right? But who we actually idolize, who we actually try to be like, if we were to be raised with that individual, who would that be? What's the image that comes to our minds right now? Is it somebody who we'd like to change? If that's the case, let's take it as homework from this khutbah, from this lecture, that let's change that. If it's somebody who we'd like to change, and if that image is somebody who we'd like to replace, it's not too late. We're still breathing. Allah still gave us life. Let's go and change that. Let's learn the lives of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the other Anbiya ﷺ and his companions and these noble souls. And let's try to learn from their lives and make them our role models. Because with that we can't go wrong. With that we can't go wrong. Even if we try to idolize a pious person of today, even that's not 100% right. You know why? Because as far as role models go, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, a very illustrious companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Man kana mustannan falyastanna biman qad mat." If anybody would like to take a role model to follow in his or her footsteps, فَلْيَسْتَنَّ بِمَنْ قَدْ مَاتٍ, then that role model should be somebody who's already passed away. Why? فَإِنَّ الْحَيَّ لَا تُؤْمَنُ عَلَيْهِ الْفِتْنَةِ. Right? Somebody who's still breathing, somebody who still has life, he's still prone, it's still plausible that he may get corrupted or she may get corrupted. Who knows? Who knows the ending result or the fate or the last or the final moments of an individual who's living, what they're going to be like? No one knows. Which is why even in terms of role model, that's the first fix to this problem of hypocrisy, right? We say, man, this person is good, I want to be like him. Man, this person is good, I want to be like her. No. MashaAllah, they're good. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and them be as far as their spiritual status is concerned. Love everybody. Which is why, you know, when we try to select these lively role models, it becomes very easy for us to discriminate people too. It becomes very easy for us to judge people. Because we say that this is a good person, I want to be like her or him, and this is a bad person, I don't want to be like her or him. Right? And it's very easy for us to now go around judging people. So love everybody, but when it comes to idolizing people, it should be none other than our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions. Love everybody. Be respectful and kind and well and compassionate to everybody. But when it comes to idolizing, inculcating lives and learning and drawing life lessons, then it should only be Muhammad ﷺ and his companions. Because that's the true role model of transparency. That's the true role model of not being a dual-faced individual. Nowadays, it's not just dual-faced. The Prophet ﷺ said the worst of people on the Day of Judgment will be that person who has two faces, right? But nowadays, it's not even about two faces anymore. We got a face for work, we got a face for school, we got a face for home, we got a face for, our colleagues, we got a face for the masjid, we got a face for, a diplomatic setting, we got a face for a business meeting, we got a face for everything, we got a whole bunch of faces, right? If two faces was that bad, imagine how many sins we may accumulate by putting on these many personalities. It's very scary to think about. First and foremost, just like the Sahaba, the first fix is acknowledging that the problem is there. Acknowledging that the problem is there. And secondly, choosing a correct role model. And that role model, you can't ever go wrong if you pick the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Right? If you look into his life, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. A walking, talking Qur'an was the Prophet ﷺ. He's a walking, talking Qur'an, meaning his life was a personification of the scripture. Right? I was conducting a program for the university students, non-Muslim students today, and we were talking about the spreading of Islam, the expansion of our faith, it making its way to multiple localities and vicinities and countries and nations. And they all were told by their professor before that it didn't at all actually spread with the sword, right? Spread with love and ideas, etc. One thing that I had to add on to that was the Sahaba radiallahu anhum were not really too fond of giving fancy lectures or telling the people that this is how it has to be, and preaching in general wasn't their style. All they had to do to represent the faith, all they had to do to tell people that this is what a Muslim should look like, is say one statement, and that would be enough. That statement would be "Kunu mithlana," be like us. They were true representatives of the faith. None of us can say that we're true ambassadors of our faith today because of our proclivities. None of us, illa masha'Allah. Illa masha'Allah. Again, this is not to instill paranoia. This is for us to constantly be vigilant. We should always be optimistic in terms of trying to inculcate. But when it comes to us feeling that we've accomplished the goal, that should never ever be the case. Because true accomplishment of a goal for us doesn't happen in this world. It's not for this world. True fulfillment, true success, true sense of accomplishment is for the hereafter. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will tell us that I'm happy with you and I'm never going to be displeased with you again, that's accomplishment. So as far as this world is concerned, be optimistic when it comes to trying, and always feel that inshallah you will accomplish, but never feel accomplished. So that there's a balance of self-confidence and lack of self-conceit. So that there's a balance of confidence and paranoia and fear and constantly checking on oneself. There needs to be a balance. There can't be extreme complacency, neither can there be too much despair, because both are tactics of shaitan. If shaitan, he's our enemy, right? He's really experienced and he's really good at what he does. If he says, you know what, this person is never going to be complacent, then he tries to attack us through the channel of despair. He makes us despair, He makes us despondent to a point where we stop trying. And when He sees that, you know what, this is not working, then He tries to make us complacent. So it has to be a balance. It has to be a constant checking. Always doing, always being optimistic, but also always being critical of ourselves. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, as far as how he was with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, we look more deeper into his life. Not the life where he would preach, not the life where he would say, you know what, this is how you should be, or that's how you should be, or that's how you shouldn't be. But more into his practical life of how he dealt with people. His servant of 10 years, Anas radiallahu anhu describes his life as a servant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, in 10 years of service, 10 years of service, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't scold me once, he didn't hit me once, he didn't raise his voice once. All that happened, just to let you know that he was being very honest, all that ever happened was one time I was supposed to go do something for him, and I was a child, so I encountered other little children playing, and I joined them. And the Prophet ﷺ happened to pass by, and he just basically told me that, weren't you supposed to be doing something? That's it. That's it. For 10 years, that's all that happened. He said, don't be rude to your subordinates. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't say he lived up to it. People say things, we don't live up to it. Greats of the past, we learn about their anecdotes because that's what they put on display. We could go into specifics, we could go into precise details of how personalities were actually like, but behind closed doors. But again, a teaching of the Prophet ﷺ prohibits us from doing that. He says, "La tasubbu mawtakum." Don't curse your dead, or don't ill talk, or don't say bad things or not nice things about people who've already passed on. So that's why we're not going to do that. But generally speaking, that was the case. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, sometimes before he would send someone for any sort of spiritually accomplished endeavor, Umar radiallahu anhu would ask people to vouch for the person's trustworthiness, right? And he would ask, do you know this person? He would call someone and ask him, do you know this person? And he would say, no, I don't. So he would say, go back. And he would call another person. He said, do you know this person? He said, yes, I do. He said, okay, have you traveled with the individual? He would say, no. Have you spent any quality time with the individual? He said, no, but I know him, he's a good brother. He said, you don't know him. If you haven't traveled with them, if you haven't lived with the person, you haven't spent quality time with an individual, you don't truly know them. You know the representative, like I said in the beginning of the lecture. Right? And this whole dilemma of having dual personalities or multiple personalities it's hypocrisy in the sense of the other personality of yours, or all of them in some cases, being a lie to a point where a person doesn't even have an identity for himself or herself. Right? And that dilemma comes through where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever He expounds upon traits of hypocrites in the Quran, whenever He expounds upon their punishment subsequently, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say things like, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. They have a painful punishment as a result or on account of their lying. So it has one of the greatest sins involved within it, just as an accoutrement for this particular grave sin. Lying, fibs. Right? It's a very great dilemma, my dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam. It is something that we have to completely eradicate, and we have to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after knowing, now this is getting a little bit like, you know what, it's a big problem. What do you do now? Hey, what do you do? What do you do about it? How do you solve it? Well, one goal that we should all, walk away with. I don't want to overwhelm us in terms of goals and information and stuff. One goal, one message at a time. One goal is, let's try to make what's not known of us better than what is known of us. What we do for the people, like, or for display. Let's make that a mere glimpse of what goodness we have hidden behind closed doors. And unfortunately, myself included, all of us included, I don't think we can vouch for ourselves that that is the case now. Am I speaking the truth? Absolutely, because if it's a very scary example, but it needs to be given, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ فَسَوْفَ فَيَقُولُ هَا أُمُقْرَأُ كِتَابِيَ. He says on the day of judgment, when you will receive your book of deeds, right? Good deeds and bad deeds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, a person who receives his or her book in his or her right hand, which is a sign that, you know, your actions are good and they added up to you making your way, or being amongst those who will make their way to paradise. So at that point, that person will start bragging. And that person will say, Ha umuqra'u kitabiya, come read my book. It's wonderful. It only has goodness to offer. There's nothing but goodness here. Right? And Allah says after that also, he will be in a very blissful situation. فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ فِي جَنَّةٍ عَالِيَةٍ قُطُوفُهَا دَانِيَةٍ كُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا هَنِيئًا بِمَا أَسْلَفْتُمْ فِي الْأَيَّامِ الْخَالِيَةِ. Like he goes on mentioning anecdotes and accomplishments and bliss after bliss, bliss after bliss for this individual who receives his book in his or her right hand. But when it comes to an individual who receives their book and the angel is offering it for their left hand, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that person who had the habit of portraying goodness and keeping clandestine, keeping hidden evil, then he will or she will act according to that trait on the day of judgment as well. And instead of receiving that book openly and in a transparent way, and in like a way where he or she will share it with people, وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِ, they'll put their hands behind their back. They'll hide, just like they would do in this world. They'll hide again. You know what they'll say? They say, يَا لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أُوتَ كِتَابِيَ, I wish I wasn't given my book. وَلَمْ أَدْرِ مَا حِسَابِيَ, I wish I didn't even know what my reckoning and what my accounting on this day is. يَا لَيْتَهَا كَانَتِ الْقَاضِيَ, better yet, I wish I was dead. Let us all ask ourselves, right? Let us all ask ourselves that if we were to be given our book of deeds, which contains everything, you know, how comprehensive is this book of deeds? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it in Surah Al-Kahf. He says when a person will receive it, he will say, مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ, what's wrong with this book? لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا. It doesn't leave a single thing, small, minute, or gargantuan, or large, except that it has recorded everything. Everything, even if you said, it's recorded. All of that. If we receive that book of ours today, will we be amongst those individuals who will go around telling everybody, come read my book? Or will we be amongst those individuals who will put our hands behind our back and say, I wish I didn't get this. I wish I was dead. Let's ask ourselves that question. And that's what we're here for. We're here for reflection. I'm not here to tell you new things to fascinate you or to entertain you. It's for self-reflection. It's self-rumination. So we can better ourselves. If that's not the case, if we're not amongst those individuals who will gladly say, come read my book, I don't have any skeletons in my closet, I don't have any grave sins that I have kept clandestine. If that isn't the case, then let's try to change it. Let's try to change it. We'll probably never accomplish it. But if we die trying, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise us amongst those who have actually accomplished. That's the goal. Do it and die trying. Do it and die trying. Because you will never have it done. That's a message that I'd like to share with everyone today. It's really, really sad that a lot of times, even sometimes, this is one of the last aspects of it that I want to cover. A lot of times when we try to command good things and we try to forbid from evil things, we're engaged in those very same evil things on a different note. Sometimes even on the same note. We are engaged in not doing the good things we command to do on the same note, or on a lighter note, or on a different note. And that's another really big dilemma of hypocrisy. The Prophet ﷺ, again, didn't make statements. He put flesh to the theory. He lived them out. For instance, he made the statement that خيركم خيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. Right? The best of you, or كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, the best of you is the best to their families, to their spouses. You know, when the wives of the Prophet ﷺ were mourning his death, after the Prophet ﷺ became the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he left this temporary realm, his wives, one of them, Salama radiallahu anha, she was crying, and you know what she said? She said, Ya Rasulullah, addressing her beloved deceased Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, you didn't only make this statement, khayrukum khayrukum li ahlihi, you lived up to it. Sadaqta ya Rasulullah, you spoke the truth, Ya Rasulullah. You lived up to it. And his wives were vouching for him. If you truly want to know the character of an individual, ask their wife or ask their spouse in general. It'll really tell you how a person is behind closed doors. There's an individual who everybody thought was a really pious man, very pious luminary and scholar. Everybody would look up to that individual, spiritually speaking. The reason why I don't mention his name, although it's known, is because he passed on. Not supposed to ill-talk those who've passed on. Right? Everyone thought that, in his funeral something special would happen, something spiritually fascinating would take place. You know what happened? There were like rats and insects of the earth circumambulating his grave. People were trying to find out and investigate as to why that's happening. When they actually got to the bottom of it and found out what's happening, they noticed that this person's wife was making dua against him, saying what an evil and cruel man this was. What an evil and cruel man this was. Right? How are we? We're talking on the phone, right? Like forget when we're talking on the phone. We're having a regular discussion with our wives. We get loud, we get rowdy with our husbands. We get loud, we get rowdy. Very heated conversation. The debate turns into a very nasty verbal squabble. Phone rings. Pick up the phone in the middle of the conversation when we're like screaming and yelling at the top of our lungs. We pick up the phone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you? Long time. Where were we? That's how we are as people. It's how we are as people. It's bitter. It's harsh, but it's real. How are we to our kids when we command them to do good? The easiest way to lose the trust and lose your kids in general is to be a hypocrite. To command them and to force them to do good things, but not live up to it. When we don't live up to the good things we tell our kids to do, they see that. And as a person who deals with young people, I get these questions all the time. Like, why do we have to listen to our parents when that's not what they're doing? What they're doing should be our role model. That's realistic. Like the kids will come up to me and tell me that, my dad, my mom is my role model. Right? Why is it that I have to listen to what they're saying, not what they're doing? That really creates goosebumps within me. I get jitters when I hear statements like that. And the thing is, sometimes we think that when we tell them to do good things, when we stop them from doing bad things, and when we do them ourselves, they're not going to notice. Kids are not stupid. Let me tell you, everybody here, one thing. Kids are very, very smart these days. They pick up. They pick up on the smallest things. They pick up on the most minute things ever. And they're like, you know what? They're not doing it, so you know what? It's probably okay. They're not going to judge you and say my mom or my dad is a bad person because they're doing that. They're not going to say that. But they're going to say, that's probably what's good, not what they're telling me. So let me just go ahead and do what they do, not what they say. They live up to it. They see when we tell them to not be promiscuous or not be very vulgar And then when we get loud and rowdy and we start yelling out curse words and stuff like that, we tell them, be nice, beta. Be nice, oh my child. Be nice, be compassionate, be loving. When it comes to us, how we deal with people, when we yell, when we get loud, when we get rowdy, when we start yelling out curse words, they see that. And they're like, it's probably okay. Because mom did it, dad did it. We tell them, oh, don't be so, chitty chatty with the opposite gender. Don't be too, flirtatious with the opposite gender. When we be fooling around amongst ourselves, uncles and aunties, they see that. And they see it's okay. We tell them to do good things. We got to live up to it. We got to be the example. We got to be the change we want to see in our kids. We got to be what we want our kids to be. Then only will they change. Because, when we do something wrong, they're not only going to do the wrong, they're going to step it up to such a high level of wrong that, we didn't even expect them to get that far. And when we do something good, they'll try to outdo you in that good as well. That's how kids work. That's the psychology of kids. Right? Of youngsters in general. I'm a youngster too. I learn from my elders. I didn't see my teachers tell me to do something and they didn't do it themselves. Rather, they would tell us to pray 2 rakats of nafil right after Maghrib. But as far as their own actions were concerned, they would pray all 6 awabin. And they would be the last people to leave the masjid. And they could have had the best of excuses. Right? We got a class to teach. We got Islamic things to do. But they wouldn't. Their spirituality was on point. They would tell us not to backbite. But when it came to us discussing things, another teacher would come up and we'd be like, man, you're a really good teacher. That teacher doesn't explain it that way. And he would be like, leave my house. Get out of here. I don't want this backbiting in my house. They lived up to it. That's what we got to be. We got to live up to it. And even when it comes to now youngsters, and take shots at the youngsters too, right? Youngsters. Well, a lot of us, we get pious, mashallah. We get very, very religious. We come to halaqas like these. We invite to halaqas like these. We invite to programs. We become very spiritual. We become very, very religious. When we go back home, though, how do we deal with our parents? How do we deal with our parents? We talk to them very logically, mashallah. We try to be reasonable with them. We try to outdo them in logic and reason and making sense. That's not what our religion teaches us. To only be nice to your parents if they make sense. To only be kind and compassionate to your parents if what they're saying fits in your 3-pound brain. No. Even belief and disbelief is not a qualifying or disqualifying matter for disrespect or respect to parents. Even if they're disbelievers, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah Himself says, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Right? Even if they're disbelievers, what can be a greater illogical idea than disbelief in Allah? Allah says, even despite that, be kind to them, be compassionate to them, be merciful and loving to them, even if they don't make sense. وَاخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. Right? Lay your wings of humility to your parents. What a beautiful metaphor. What a beautiful picture is Allah painting in that particular verse of the Quran. When a bird is shot and it's just laying there at just humility, humble. It doesn't have its wings anymore. It can't fly. It's on the ground. It's useless. Right? That much humility, that much humbleness, that much kindness, and that much servitude and politeness we have to have with our parents, regardless of whether they make sense or not. Right? That's what our religion teaches us. That's what our religion teaches us. Right? We want to, say, be nice to your parents, be kind to your parents. We give khutbahs about, even as youngsters, sometimes we get an opportunity to give a khutbah to other kids, to preach to other kids, to learn from and teach other kids. But then when it comes to implementation, zero. You see, the most pious kids doing the most wrong things. And it's a really great dilemma too. Piety is not only in words and talk, my dear respected brothers and sisters. It's not only talk, it's about action. It's about coupling your verbal statements with your corporeal actions. That's what our religion is. Walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Right? We don't want to end up on the Day of Judgment. This is the last thing, I'll finish off with this. Right? We don't want to end up on the Day of Judgment where, the Prophet ﷺ, this is a very terrifying hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says that people will gather around an individual in hellfire who will be dragging his intestines, right, as a result of them being melted out of his body. He'll be dragging them and carrying them with him. They will gather around him, not in astonishment or bafflement of what they see. No, that's normal. That's everybody in hell, right? Everybody in hell is going to go through some crazy amount of punishment, right? It's a very scary place, right? We talk about hell, we talk about heaven and stuff like that. If we actually implemented things which would make us stay away from hell and go to heaven, like, we'd be alright. Do we actually do that? That's another question we got to ask ourselves. Nevertheless, this person would be dragging his intestines in the middle of hell, and everybody will gather around that individual. Not out of astonishment for what they see, but because they would go to him and approach him and tell him, weren't you the same person who used to tell us to do good things in this world? Weren't you the pious man? Weren't you the pious lady who used to always tell us to do good things? Who used to always preach and say, you know what? This is wrong and this is right. Why are you here? What are you doing here? This place for us. Well, you're supposed to be in heaven, weren't you? The person will respond. Very scary response. He would say, كنت آمركم بالمعروف. I used to ask you to do good things, ولا آتي, and I never used to do them myself. وَنَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْ مُنْكَرٍ. I used to stop you from doing evil things. وَلَا أَنْهِي نَفْسِي. أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. He said, and I never used to stay or abstain or stay far back myself. I used to do them. I used to indulge in them myself. Again, this is not to make us pessimistic about what we are currently. It's for us to reflect and to try to bring about and change in our life. We should all walk away with the goal. One goal, that's it. I'm giving you one goal. I'm giving myself one goal. Let's try to make what is known from us a mere glimpse of what is unknown from us in terms of goodness. Let's try to clean out the skeletons from our closets. That's a metaphor for the vices and evils that we keep stored in our concealed matters. Let's try to clean all that out and let's try to keep it clean. If it ever gets dirty again, let's try to clean it out. Let's not fall into the traps of shaitan, of complacency and despair. Let's walk away with this goal at least. Let it not be when Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, let us also be paranoid like scholars and illustrious luminaries of the past, not so that we can become despondent, so we can constantly be on a voyage to better ourselves. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, very beautiful couplet, he says, لَوْ عَلِمَ النَّاسُ قَبَائِحَ سَرِيرِي لَأَبَى السَّلَامُ عَلَى مَنْ تَلْقَانِي. If the people had to know what evil things are in store of my clandestine matters, of what I keep concealed, then nobody would even say salam to me. And this is Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, an illustrious luminary. Let's ask ourselves, if people were to know, if Allah were to expose what is hidden of us, will people even greet us? Will people even meet us? Will people even like to talk to us? If that's not the case, let's try to change it. And that's my message. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me and all of us the ability to implement and inculcate whatever has been said and not just hear it for hearing it. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.